thinner or younger? No, we've known each other for what, 30 years more or less.
Yes.
Yeah, we started partially the same type of generation, and I think it's important that your evolution and your generation came same as ours after a big stop. You had to restart cinema on your own.
Yes, we come from 21 years of military dictatorship before this, and then 4 years of complete chaos with the first elected government. So 25 years of half silence.
They froze the economy, right?
They froze the economy at that point. And this is when I made what I consider to be the first film, actually with Fernanda Montenegro already, called Foreign Land. And a film that was really about the desire to meet cinema again. This is why I blended absolutely everything.
Yes.
There's Nouvelle Vague, there's Italian neorealism, there's Nelson Pereira dos Santos, and all the Brazilian cinema novo is in it. And I have this theory that the film is always fragment of a whole school of cinema, but not only of Brazil, but of Latin America to start with.
Yeah, and I think there's a moment, Mexico in the 70s, Brazil in the 70s, these generations had to reinvent cinema. We have to do it every 10 years. Somebody has to come and reinvent it. Now in Mexico there is mostly great female directors reinventing it one more time. But you have, the way you work, you fuse in a strange way documentary and fiction, but there's a very controlled sense of the frame and narrative that evolves, but you feed back and forth from what you're doing, and you let it talk to you back. Even in this movie, at Aero.
It is true, but I have to say that I felt that recently in an extraordinary Mexican film called Totem by Lila Viles.
Yes.
That's an incredibly brilliant film. Because for me, cinema was what did two things. This is why I fell in love with cinema. It's what unveiled a world I didn't know to start with. So it made my perception of the world larger. But it also transported me to a reality where I forgot that I was watching cinema.
Yes.
And in Totem, I was with that family for the length of the film.
Yes.
It was an extraordinary experience, And there are ways to get into that. The way that I'm more comfortable with is definitely by blending the documentary form that I come from with fiction. Antonioni used to say that whenever he brought actors together, his ideal way would be just to ignite something and then film the scene
as it happens.
As it happened, like a documentary.
Yes.
But what do you do with take two?
We should ask him. But what is beautiful about it, and I remember in this movie when we were going through the festivals and I would listen to you talking on the Q&As, you were talking about how this movie, there were several instances in which you started provoking something, like her sitting on the table and all of a sudden people were coming to read and take their letters. And the final procession, the 800, how many extras? 800 people?
800 extras in that scene.
In the religious procession.
Yes, but I think that what you touched on is so important to understand this film. Like the first moment in which we put that table and did hide the camera in the central station, a lot of people started to actually sit there to dictate letters we hadn't anticipated. So the film, from the very beginning, except for the first, that's a person from the documentary that does the first testimonio. How do you say that? Testimony. Half of the other ones are actually real people that sat there and then dictate what was truly from their heart. We're in a pre-digital world. You have to remember that. There were no cell phones, no nothing. And Fernanda Montenegro had done only 6 features before, and people didn't really recognize her. And so it allowed us to do that kind of free-form film. The crew were 15, maybe less people in the middle of that, of the station. So we disappeared in there. So that's the beginning. But the procession was much more complicated because during the location scouting for the film, I had witnessed a procession, and I said, "Wow, this tells so much about who we are."
Exactly.
And it's hidden in the heartland, and I want to bring that to the film as a filmic material that needs to be captured. And the best way to do this is obviously to invite the people into the film, and we invited real pilgrims. And I always shoot with one camera, but I have a second camera on the side.
Yes.
But a little bit like Hitchcock, I think there's just one place to put the camera each time, one man, something like that. Except that when we started to do the scene that you just watched, after 10, 15 minutes, the reenactment of the scene ceased to be a reenactment and became the scene itself.
It became real.
It became completely real, and we lost complete control. So the only thing we could do was to do everything that you see there is a take one. And we had the traveling shot already set up since the beginning, so we were running as fast as we could because the whole exterior was done in one night. And at one point, Walter Carvalho, the wonderful VP I worked with there, handled one camera. I picked up the second camera, and we have the people praying. A lot of that is our combined work at that moment for that. And when she enters into the house of prayers, that is an environment that we had control. But even there, things happen that we didn't expect. And that's this is when life really breathes into cinema for me,
But it's very beautiful to see that the awakening from the material brutality of the city and the more delicate spirituality, whether it's right, wrong, is religion or that, happens. And you travel the country, and she travels spiritually.
Yes.
She awakens to something more delicate.
It's so interesting what you're touching upon, because for me, that's a woman who had lost, during those 25 hard years, she had lost the sensitivity that she had, and she was making ends meet, and in a way that the end would justify the means, so she would pick up the letters, and she would not send the letters, The boy, the accident in her life, the curse that she thinks it's a curse at some point.
It always looks like that.
Yes. What the boy really allows her is for her to understand that the world is much ampler than she ever imagined. So it's a journey to the resensibilization of that woman, and at the same time it's a journey for the search of the father of that kid. And in Brazilian, the word father and country, they're almost the same. The father is pai, and country is país.
Yes.
And therefore there's just one letter in between.
Yes.
So for me, it was always the search of a country after those 25 years.
But one of the things that happen in trajectories like that when you write a screenplay is the characters gain everything when they lose everything. Yes. She has her apartment, her new TV, this and that, and as the narrative continues and she grows, she loses more and more money and ends up having nothing except she has now everything.
Yeah, and she gains, it's a journey towards feminização, how do you say that? There's one thing that in the beginning that was very important on a grammatical standpoint is that the colors were, if you look at the beginning of the film, there's no depth of focus and the colors are all neutral, gray or I would say brown. Sepias, because this is the world that she was in. And as the journey, the boy obliges her to drift with him to the heartland. It's a journey about opening up sensibility to other colors that start to invade. There's no green, there's no blue, there's no yellow, there's no red at the beginning, and this all enters sensorially from that moment on. And the lenses were, long lenses with very deep, very little depth of focus, start to open wide, so that she starts to actually see much more of the world that she could imagine.
But you've always had, a good director talks nicely, a great director listens nicely, and you always listen to reality. There is, and your preoccupations have evolved, your style has evolved, from this to your last movie, and still here. You leave things behind, they become more economical, but more expressive in a strange way. Like when we were starting, we were young, wild Bohemians, you try to do more to impress and to transmit an emotion. And in your last movie, you're doing more elegant, more spare, more beautifully expert tracery, and the emotion is surprisingly enormous.
You have to gain something with maturity.
Yes, I gained something.
I wish I had Guillermo's incredible inventivity, because that would be much easier starting point. I don't. So I have to grab from reality and try to drift, to drive from that. But in the film, you're right. My last film is an exercise much more in, I would say, in subtraction of elements.
Yes.
From the moment where the father is taken away, it has to do with subtracting light, subtracting sounds as they are muffled because the house is invaded. It has to do also with the subtraction of, I would say, of verbo, of the verb, of dialogue. Because what the military dictatorship, in the case of the last film, also does is that it alters language itself, because you can't speak openly anymore. So the whole film becomes non-verbal. It's about what you see by looking at somebody else. The film becomes structurally much less verbal than at the very beginning.
But the interesting thing for me is that the movies there's a direct line between them, they're completely opposite effects. This is about gaining and losing at the same time.
Yes.
But I'm still here, which by the title alone is saying that we're going to talk about things that are not there, but you're still there. The removal of the father, the removal of the law, the removal of so many things that are not about the past, but now. It's so beautiful, because you're working with a language that requires negative space, so to speak.
Yes. Actually, this question of the negative space was very present in my mind once the father is taken away. I wanted that his absence could be felt from that moment on. So the camera that was very vibrant at the beginning of the film, very much as in many, many sequences in here, the camera becomes still, and then the lens becomes wider, so that there's now negative space in that you feel the absence,
yes.
and then you feel the loss before you have, so that you can understand what you have to overcome, which is that loss, and somehow verbalize it in a way and offer forms of resistance that are not there, that I think I learned a lot from you, because there's such precision. Take the Shape of Water or all the other films. I had the impression that the camera could only be there, and Shape of Water that has so much movement in the beginning, for instance.
I haven't stopped moving since 2001.
There's something very beautiful about it. That reminds me of a sentence by Borges, the Jorge Luis Borges, the Argentinian writer. He says that every single art form wants to be music, but very rarely they manage to be music. And to be music, if you listen to music, one note echoes in the following note that echoes in the third one, and you have a musical structure. You manage to do films that have a complete musical structure. That is incredibly rare. I try to.
There was a painter called Ivan Albright, who was very famous from Chicago, that took so long to finish a portrait that he would start with the mother and end with the daughter, posing for him 20 years later. And I have the feeling that that's you. In the two movies, in the extremes of your career, because you have to finish your portrait with the daughter.
When the film premiered in Venice, it was really warmly received and embraced and but some of the people who saw the film didn't realize that Fernanda Montenegro at the end was Fernanda Montenegro, so they thought that it was the best makeup artist they had ever seen.
But the beauty of this movie, you have something that happens starting to something that you sort of observe and guide. Even the interaction between them, Josue and Fernanda, is so beautiful. I know the ratio, having made movies with kids, I know the ratio is always 100 terrible kids with one great kid. How long did it take you to find it? And
1,000 tests, and we went all over Brazil for 8 months. The film was delayed because I couldn't find the boy, and then one day the group of 5 kids that were the best kids that we had found so far were united in São Paulo, and I had to take the flight at 7 a.m. to meet them in São Paulo. And when I went to the airport and it was raining, there was a kid who came to me and said, "Listen, I'm the Shushan boy of this place, and it's raining, so you're not going to, could you lend me the money to eat something, and then when you're back from São Paulo, I'll pay you." It was so convincing that I said, okay, he's going to be the guy. So I told my assistant, Sergio Machado, who's now a great filmmaker, and I said, Sergio, the kid who's going to do the film is at the airport, and you just have to pick him up and do the test. And he was the one who had traveled Brazil for 8 months. So I said, are you completely insane? Actually, he went there, and he found Vinicius, who's this incredible...
He's still acting.
Yes, he's still acting, and he's a really good friend. And he took all the 4 other Shushan boys who made the test. It was the best collective test we ever had. It was an extraordinary collective test, because he had the roughness, but the understanding of it, the emotional intelligence of the character, that emotional intelligence. The incredible honesty and integrity, which I could find in the eyes when he looked at me for the first time, So, and that happens less than a mile away from the production house we were working at. We had gone throughout Brazil for 100,000 miles.
That has happened in film more often than we think.
Did that happen to you?
Oh, yes. Yes, on Devil's Backbone, we read everybody, and there was a kid that was there for the extras. I said, would you mind reading? And he came in and he said, you're out the bar. Right there. But the beauty of it is...
By the way, Viva Marisa Paredes.
Oh yes, the best. The best human being and the best actress. So, let's give her a little applause.
Yes.
One would assume that Fernanda, as more seasoned and having acted, guided him, but I get the impression in several scenes that it's him that is pushing her. Is that
because of her extraordinary generosity. There's something that's also a question I would like to share with you. If you had already worked, for me it was the first time that an actress came after receiving a screenplay with the screenplay completely noted down. There were many colors, but she had observations that had to do with her character, but with each other character in all the scenes. So she came in with an understanding of the film as a whole, not only at that specific moment in the film. And when I found the kid, he had obviously to understand what acting was about, because at the first, I forgot to say, the first question that I asked him, I said, would you like to do a test? And he said, for what? He said, cinema. I said, I can't do a test for cinema, I've never been to the cinema, I said, but you've seen it on TV? He said, yes. But I don't think it's the same thing. They said, you're right, it's not the same thing. You're the proof of that. The thing that was extraordinary is that Fernanda Montenegro, for 3 weeks, started to rehearse with him, but not rehearsing the scenes of the film, because I didn't want him to know what it would be. Which I still do, but on I'm Still Here, the kids of I'm Still Here did not get the screenplay before the shoot. But we also rehearsed in I'm Still Here, exactly like in Central Station, 3 weeks prior to the beginning of the shoot, with scenes written that would be before the film. And that gives texture, and that gives a history between the characters, and that allows for something to exist. And Fernanda was incredible, because she was coming from theater, basically, but she was coming from the collectiveness of theater. The theater is, that you clean the floor, you bring up that, you do this, you do that. So she was used to the communal part of it. Yeah. Yes, the communal part of it, and she knows that every single part is fundamental. I couldn't have done that without her,
But the other thing that I find beautiful, and this is where the difference between cinema and a movie is, characters in a road movie normally soften to each other and find solutions and all that bullshit. They become better, and the desire to make these characters imperfect and not virtuous. They steal, they lie, they hide. She's capable of selling a kid for a TV. If this had been just a film, a movie, they would have found each other, they would have left, they would have run behind the bus, and the bus would have stopped. And the beauty of this continues. Like what I find beautiful about your movies, all the way to I'm Still Here, is not offering solutions, just making a reality. What you said cinema gave you is what you give us. It was a reality we can fall into and not feel betrayed by a desire to just tell a fucking story.
Yeah, but that again, I think I learned from Latin American cinema as a whole. In your films, I sense that in Alfonso Cuarón's films as well. Alejandro's is like an array of imperfect characters.
Yes. And he's the one, you're talking about, he will never like me to say this.
But just the two of us.
The Crash on the Water Sparrows, which everybody, when we saw it, was spectacular, right, and amazing, is because he went out of control. He went past the barriers, past the cameras, and he tries to provoke the same thing, right, the documentary, blah, blah, blah. But don't you think what we had as a generation, and I think it was our generation, we felt a kinship. We immediately became friends and supporters.
Yes, I completely agree with that. And I think that we started with the impression that films are always pregnant of those that came before, and of all that on a subconscious, but also on a more, I would say, present frontal manner. I have the sheer understanding that the films are a column of things that we've seen and that we're sensitive offensive too, you know. But I think that we all drift from a form of humanist cinema also.
Yes.
But I don't think we have a choice.
No.
We come from, you know, from societies that are so far from being
First world.
No. I think we're better than that in many ways.
Yeah, that's what that makes us fight for it.
Yes, but you know, we're from very unjust societies, so empathy is part of the game here, and to see Fernanda said to me all the time during the shoot of this film, and she says, we don't have a way out that isn't channeled through the existential and the human.
Yes, that's the weapon.
Yeah, that's the way in, I think, and that is what I sensed in you know, in I would say in Argentinian cinema, in Chilean cinema,
and everybody that came before,
Mexican, of course.
Robert Rocha or Aristarain or Richstein or
absolutely, and even in the way that cinematographers look at the world. You know, when I look at La Perla, for instance, wow.
Figueroa,
I had the possibility to meet Figueroa once at the Mostra de São Paulo.
I was his mascot for a whole movie.
Wow. He was an absolute genius. For me, he's the most extraordinary cinematographer of all time.
It is, and I think they're telling us we have to wrap up fucking. The thing that I feel is that the generation when we come in, our cinemas were meant to be dead. Even the critical structure in Mexico was saying there's no more Mexican film. And we said, screw you, you know, make it. And you have the same thing here.
Yes, and I have to say that we felt this so vividly 4 years ago, you know, because we're coming from a double pandemic in Brazil. We had the COVID pandemic without the vaccines, and then we had this right-wing pandemic, and they were superimposed, you know. And cinema took a blow because very few people continued to go to the movies, and when they went to the movies, it was for that specific film, blockbuster, etc., etc. So when the last film I did was released in Brazil, it was really an enormous question mark. Would people go?
And what was the answer? It was.
Yes.
It became a huge phenomenon.
Yeah, 4 million people went, and but I think that was so important because that showed us two things. First, that we need to see our reflection, the reflection of our identity on the large screen. And I think that is linked to, and we also want to see a hidden part of our history also, and see that reflection. So that those two things are pretty much linked to what we need at that specific moment. But I think there's something primal into this as well. I don't know if you agree, but you know, the first paintings that exist are cave paintings, and I think that urge to leave a reflection of who we were at a specific time, who these guys were, who that specific group was at a specific time, was already a form to do cinema that will be shared by audiences later.
And be left behind.
Left behind, to leave a memory behind. Everything that they try to do now is to erase memory.
Tom Steele.
Well, and we have to keep memory alive.
Yeah. You know? And identity, because the first thing the right wing wants to tell you is that culture is not necessary. That culture is superfluous. That you don't need it because they know that, I mean, the poorest human being is a human being that has no reflection. And we even live it now with the apps where they tell you, no, images can be done by an app. Fuck you, they can. You know, and I think that the power of your cinema is that it's collective. It's always been collective and always been profoundly humanistic. And this is a line that you continue until now. and they're telling me that either I rap or they will never give me popcorn. If I may say, I want to give an anticipated applause because this movie is a direct line with the last movie, and I think we're going to get much joy in the very near future from I'm Still Here. So
¡Viva Brasil, cabrones!
All those Q&As and exchanges will look very dim to me and very uninteresting. So you bring us something extraordinary.
Obrigado. Yeah!